and a very beautiful community. Let's talk a little bit about the cacophony of the political world outside our window. Now, I want to say three things about the gathering and scrambling in Europe, but first a remark about Trumpian change in the United States. A mistake of the Zelensky administration has been to overestimate how much Trump's deal-making to end the war is goal-oriented. What it is in fact oriented toward is Trump's need for narcissistic supply. That's what we witnessed in the Oval Office, with a big component of sadism thrown in there too at Zelensky's expense. Now, Starmer and Macron get this more, but I don't think they understand quite how far it goes. And I think many European leaders are speaking in a way that palpably underestimates the reality of how far the Trump administration's actions are degrading US state capacity, the kind of capacity you need to be a stable actor on the global stage. Now, three things about what you're seeing in Europe, which may look like a kind of reset toward European sovereignty around its security. I don't think that's what's happening. I'm not seeing a decoupling there. What I'm rather seeing is an attempt to act as an emergency intermediary and re-bridge Ukraine with the United States. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said, "We'll never choose either side of the Atlantic. The US is vital to securing the peace we all want to see in Ukraine." And US British envoy Peter Mandelson said that European leaders must give unequivocal backing to the initiative of the Trump administration to broker a peace. And then he made an outlandish remark that's going to make Ukrainians wonder, well, if these are our friends, what are our enemies like? When he said Ukraine should be first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow it. So there is certainly some attempt to get Ukraine into line with whatever it is the Trump administration is trying to do. That's the main enterprise. It's an emergency intermediary, not a decoupling enterprise. Now, the second thing that's going on is exploring Europe's maximal capacity to play a role in keeping any deal that occurs secure. Now, the problem is that the best way to do that and give Ukraine security is to have European troops on the ground that are prepared to shoot if they come into contact with Russians or if the Russians reinvade. The problem is that that's not where we are heading with what Europeans are capable of in terms of commitment, because West European powers see the avoidance of direct military engagement between their troops and Russian troops as a greater goal than the goal of ensuring Ukraine's survival. That's, of course, an important goal to them too, but as things stand, it's less important than the avoidance of a direct military confrontation between European and Russian troops. Then there's, of course, the third element. Well, in fact, let me make one more historical remark about security guarantees. I think sometimes we risk underestimating how far security guarantees are political. We tend to think that there is a piece of paper and it's, Trump would say, a strong piece of paper, that settles the issue. But the problem is the meaning of what's there is always going to be conditional upon the geopolitical reality, which is itself going to be conditional upon what is going on inside the democracies of Western powers making these guarantees. We're seeing right now one of the most astonishingly secure guarantees we have known, Article 5, sort of halfway melting down before our eyes. So you can never separate security guarantees from politics. Now, the third thing that's going on there is, of course, making sort of medium steps toward medium-term European capacity to look after its own security. And then you might say, well, that kind of looks embarrassing because the gulf between words and actions are so big. I mean, you've got, the Brits doing well over the last few days, and I'm very impressed by my Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But at the same time, military experts tell us that the United Kingdom could muster, perhaps 10,000 rotating troops at a push. So that gap between reality and speech is considerable. And there is a tendency to sort of be a little bit allergic to highfalutin statements from Kaja Kallas about how Europe stands with Ukraine and so on. But I would put it the other way around. I do actually think that in a difficult situation, aspirational speech is better than no aspirational speech. And I think fabrication of reality is an important part of politics and can be one way to accelerate the way we bridge where we are and where we would like to be. Now, Europe faces a very important paradox that we'll talk about more. Let me put it cartoonishly. To protect us against Putin, we need to spend more on defense. Realistically, the way European powers are going to do that is via reducing other spending, via introducing more austerity in economic policy. But doing that will bring to power post-truth, right authoritarian political forces that are going to be favorable to Putin. So we need to increase defense spending to protect ourselves against Putin. But in increasing defense spending, we're going to bring into power all over Europe political parties that are not going to be disposed to handling that defense spending in a way that takes the Putin risk seriously. So that's a real paradox, right? Defense spending austerity, austerity the rise of pro-Putin parties. That's a very difficult balance to strike, about which we'll talk more. Not enough people are talking about it, right? It's partly because working class Americans feel deprioritized that Trump's in power, right? And Trump is, in a sort of a real act of narcissistic submission to what Putin, as we speak, more on the main channel about that soon. Now, two quick grounding remarks. I made a very strong effort to be clear in the last few videos that it's okay to talk about what Zelensky could have done better in the bullying act he experienced in the Oval Office. A good portion of people are in a vortex of saying not just that he couldn't have done anything better, but that talking about that is bad. And here is what I did. Under every single comment where I left a tough reply on this issue, I went back round and I left a gentle and soft and encouraging reply to complement it. And that's because we all have to be more intentional in the information environment, and we all have to consider the fact that we need two things now: more compassion toward ourselves, but also more compassion toward others. But actually, compassion toward yourself starts first, because being gentler on ourselves, we can therefore be gentler on others, which helps the way we engage and helps us become more conducive to, encouraging speech as free association, which is something I'm very committed for in our comment section. Last remark about nervous systems now. The world is accelerating. History is accelerating right now. We're in a bit of a roller coaster ride, and we're just beginning to tilt down, and it's going to go faster and faster for a while. Trump's actions are contributing to this. Our nervous systems can't go at double the speed, even if the world goes at double the speed. So one of the tasks for everybody is to reset your nervous system so it keeps going at the same speed as before, even though the world's going at double the speed, because otherwise it's not going to be sustainable for you. So that's very important. And in a clumsy way, because I'm learning with you together too, I'm going to try to do a better job of encouraging this in all of us. Talk very soon. Lots of love.